doesn't matter if you're a small, tiny startup or mom and pop shop. And sensitive data is your health.
And then she hung up on me. Just Google yourself.
Be careful.
Welcome to our masterclass about data protection, which is a European law to protect your personal data. In this masterclasses, we're going to go through different examples, checklists, and everything you need to know about GDPR when you're having a business, both to protect your reputation and also to build trust around the people you collaborate with.
And not getting a fine if you're a business running a startup or any other type of business.
Of course, because this law was a really big thing when it was launched in the Europe 2018. And that's why we want to give you all the details about it so you can keep growing your business in a safe way. And today, this episode is also powered by Key Solutions. We're very happy to be able to record in this studio. Let's go. Imagine a press release about fraud being released to the public. And I feel that I am the one being pointed out in this press release without my name being published. How can I do in this situation, and is it personal data? Kat, you're here to explain everything to us that we need to know about it.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
No, nightmare situation.
Yes.
And it happens. And it can be on social media. Many different instances where we feel that our reputation is on the line, perhaps without the name being mentioned. So that's one example when GDPR is so important.
Yes, but in this case, if people can identify me, what kind of data can it be?
Well, let's start with why do we want to know, because this first episode we'll talk about what is personal data. We'll keep it short and simple.
Yeah, and why this law also is so important.
Yeah, and why it is important to know if it's personal data or not. Because if it's not, GDPR does not apply, and you're free to do whatever you want, unless it is some other law that you're breaching. So, number one, to get into GDPR, to know if you have any rights as an individual based on GDPR, we need to decide if it's personal data or not. And for you as a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're a small, tiny startup or mom and pop shop. You will still have to comply with GDPR if the information is personal data. So that's why it's always key to understand what is and what isn't. Because personal data, information, is money.
Yeah.
It's gold. It's knowing your customers. It's being able to reach with marketing, behavioral information about your users, any investors you want to talk to, so forth. Your employees, yourself, personal data. What is it really? So we'll start with defining that. And when it comes to GDPR, it applies anytime you're established in the EU or EES region or anywhere in the world if you process personal data from the EU, from a person, a data subject. In this case, you're the data subject. You're the one feeling that this is data about you when you talked about the press release. So then, no matter if you're based in India or the US, you still need to comply with GDPR if you have personal data concerning a person in the EU. So for any of you tech startups or anybody offering your products and services online globally, you will need to comply with GDPR. So that's why it's such a broad and very important regulation. So it goes beyond just us in the EU. So number one. So personal data, that is information that either directly can identify a natural person. Natural person is either a physical living person or indirectly. So directly or indirectly.
That's what it makes it so hard.
Yeah, it is complex. Because what is what? Your name, Ida Shimmy. That would be a direct identifier. Or your ID number, or your telephone number, your address, so forth. Indirect identifiers, we typically, and the UK authorities do a great job in explaining this because they have a GDPR copy, I would say, because they're not in the EU anymore. They call it a spectrum. You go from I can identify Ida to it could be Ida, it could be anybody. Who is it? I don't know. Somebody, information, right? So here we have your name. That's you.
That's me.
But what if I said, okay, in this press release about fraud, it was a red-headed person. Can I identify you indirectly? Most likely not.
Most likely not.
Too broad, right? It was a woman.
We started to get somewhere, but not.
No. Okay, it's a woman. She's red-headed. She lives in Stockholm. She's a communication expert. And she has a podcast called Business Law Toolbox. Now, can we identify you?
Yes, you can, because you can put the pieces together.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's an indirect identifier. And even if I said it's a host on Business Law Toolbox, she's a female and she's redheaded, then that, if I'm the controller, I'm the one providing and processing this information. And by processing, we mean any type of usage. Gathering the information, storing it, putting it online, putting it in the press release, anything using that data. But if I give you that information, you're redheaded, you're a host of the Business Law Toolbox podcast, that doesn't suffice to identify you for me, right? But if somebody else has additional knowledge, which they can go online and watch the YouTube channel, and they see that, okay, one is blonde and one is redheaded, by adding those pieces together, I can identify you. Then it will be personal data. So the EU Court of Justice has said that even if that indirect information needs to be added on by other information that you either have already, like your colleagues have or something, or that you can find online, and by putting that together, identifying Ida, then we have personal data.
Okay.
So, you can imagine, and we have some caveats. We'll do a checklist now.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to the checklist, which can be very good to have.
Indeed. So number one, the information we're talking about, does it concern a natural person? If yes, could be GDPR. If no, is it a legal entity? Then GDPR does not apply, unless, again, it can also be the indirect identifier of a natural person. So, number one, what does it concern? Is it a natural person? Number two, is that person alive? Because it only protects data from living individuals. So if you're not born yet, or if you have deceased, you're not protected. So that data can be processed without complying with GDPR. And then that data concerning that individual, can you use it to directly identify Ida? Again, and that can be address, it can be phone number, and it can be physical information, subjective information. So it's very, very broad. Any information is what GDPR says. So if it can directly identify you, it's GDPR, you need to comply. Well, okay, it can't directly identify you, then we'll check, can it indirectly identify you? And then you need to check, can it indirectly identify you together with other available information that the person with reasonable means can add up. So it's you.
Okay, but what can exactly the indirect identifiers be?
Like I said, with the podcast example, or with the press release, we had one of those cases was tried very recently, where the press release talked about a person, a scientist, having committed fraud. And by just reading that, you couldn't know who she was. But she said that all my colleagues at the university will be able to know it's me. And that putting together what the colleagues knew and how they had defined the fraudulent behavior together added up as. And we can also talk about IP addresses. Is that indirect or direct? And can you, together with other location information, putting that together with other information, or a job title combined with which company we're talking about. So saying you're a CEO, but you're the CEO of Business Law Toolbox. Then suddenly, who is that?
Yeah, you can identify me directly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very, very case by case, very broad. And when in doubt, I would say think it's personal data.
Yes.
But that's if indirect. We have more on the checklist. Then we also have to check, is it anonymized? Because if it is, then it's no longer personal data. You can do what you want. And that's really good for you guys running a tech company. You want to know user behavior, or you want to sell that data to somebody else. It can also be health related, but then you have even more additional layers of what you cannot do. But now we're just talking about if you're into GDPR or not. If you anonymize it, it will not be personal data anymore. And then you can use it without complying with GDPR. And it can be pseudonymized, but you need to make sure that nobody holds the key. So if I have information about you, and instead of Ida, I say person number 1, as long as you cannot backtrack and have a key that can lock the number 1 to Ida. Because if there is a key where you can backtrack and go back to number 1 was Ida, then it's still personal data. But if you cut the cord completely, so person number 1 cannot be backtracked to Ida, then it's not personal data anymore.
Okay.
And aggregated data also is not personal data, because then it's on such a broad scale that you cannot identify. Like all of the women, or 95% of the women in Sweden, love to listen to podcasts. That's too broad.
Yeah, too broad.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a lot of responsibility as a business to know what's personal data or not. But as you said, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, when in doubt, personal data.
Because what can happen? Because when this law came in Europe in 2018, I mean, a lot of businesses were very stressed of how to handle the information, what's going to happen if we make something illegal. I mean, everybody talked about it.
Yeah.
And they start to make like policies, how to use the information and not, and everything need to be written down and such things.
Yeah. And next episode, we'll look at who is really responsible, who's the controller and who's the processor. And then we'll go through what it means. So this episode, what is personal data? And like you said, it's very many rules how you may use the data, process it, if it does concern a data subject. But we'll help you out. We'll go through and we'll have checklists and we'll have examples so you know more. Because it's not only a hefty fine that comes along with the breach. Perhaps even more important for you as a smaller business will be that it can be hard to raise funds if you want to find an investor or sell your company. And it also can really hurt your reputation with customers if it comes out that you sold their information to Google or you did not comply with the GDPR or something. So it's so much more than just getting a fine. It's about building your goodwill, your reputation, being able to attract other key businesses and so forth.
And also take your responsibility. But I'm thinking also that this law exists and we live in such an open society where, I mean, everybody's name is all over the internet, for example. This is so important, but do people really think about that they have their personal data up and running all the time?
Absolutely.
I mean, we just consent all the time.
True, but I would say yes.
Yeah.
More and more so. And we'll get back also to what you can do if you feel like your data is being used wrongfully, or if there's some information online or somewhere that you do not like. We'll get back to that in another episode, the right to be forgotten.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we talked about what is considered personal data, and Kat explained it so well to us as usual.
Thank you.
So now you know when you have a businesses, do be more safe than sorry to protect personal data.
And next time we'll talk about who's responsible, and then we'll go into what you need to do when you have the data.
Yes. So stick around until next episode. And we also want to thank Key Solutions for being in their studio today, which we are recording Thank you so much, and until next time. Are you responsible for the GDPR? That could cost you hefty fines if you do not comply with the GDPR. And that's why we have in this masterclass to make sure that you know what it's all about. Because it can cost you more than hefty fines. It can also make you get bad reputation if you do not follow the GDPR. Kat, you're here with us today in this Key Solutions studio.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for having us here. So let's start. And also thank you, Key Solutions, for having us today. Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Yes.
So we talked about what is personal data in the first episode.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about who is responsible for that processing. And processing of personal data was any type of usage of that information. Storing, gathering, if you send an email, if you send marketing, if you save it in any type, way, shape or form, really.
Sounds like a really big thing to
or
do.
if you sell it to somebody, which is a big thing, of course, in particular if you're a startup in some shape.
So first of all, where do we start?
Yeah. So GDP has 3 players, really. Number 1 was you, the data subject, the one that the information concerns. That's a natural person. And then we have the data controller and the data processor. And the data controller, that's what we want to know if it is you. Because then you are responsible. You will be responsible for how you comply with GDPR, what type of data you're allowed to process, how it's allowed to be processed, how long you may keep it, making sure you have sufficient security, IT and other type of security around it. And you need to be the one responding and communicating with either the data subject in any cases where she wants to use her rights under GDPR. And if you're the data processor, you're the follower. You follow the instructions of the controller. So you also have a responsibility to make sure that you only comply with how it's processed, keeping it sure, security, etc. And also making sure you not misuse it in any other way. But your responsibility is less. So controller number 1. Let's break it down.
Yes.
Ida, you have a pizzeria.
I have a pizzeria.
Yes. Then you want to sell pizza to your customers, right?
Yep.
And then you use an app. I'm the app developer. I have this app and I do home delivery. I take care of everything. So you decide what information you want and how you want to communicate. You talk to your customers. You direct them to me, to the app, advertising. Go here, you make sure you have the address where you're going to deliver it. You need to have payment information, all right, etc. So you will be the controller. It will be your customers. You decide what data you want to gather and why, how it's going to be used. Then I'm the processor because I say, okay, you need this. You want me to help you with a payment transaction. You want me to help you with the delivery and the orders coming in. So quite simple. So if we jump on that checklist, I would say that number 1 will again be just checking, are you established in the EU? If yes, GDPR. If no, do you offer your services or goods or in any other way, shape or form, come and even touch data, personal data, that relates to a data subject within the EU or EES, then GDPR apply. It can also be if you're a processor just storing data from a EU entity that is regulated under GDPR. So that's number 1. And number 2, the test will be, are you the one deciding what data to process, how it's going to be processed, the purpose of using it, then you're the controller. If you're the one saying, okay, I'll take care of this, no problem. Like if you also in your pizzeria, you might use Google Docs. You might make a list of all of your employees or customers that you want to send special offers. Then you're using a cloud service, a SaaS solution. They're the processor. Again, you're the controller.
And then I have the responsibility.
The majority of the responsibility, including ensuring that any processor that you're using, that you have an agreement, a data processing agreement with them, and that they are GDPR compliant. So you need to be mindful who you use as a service provider.
Because I will be responsible at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, exactly. So use well-established, because then you can be quite sure, and typically they already will have this standardized data process agreement that they will hand you, so you don't have to think about it if you're a small business owner as much, but be careful. But that's the test, and to add a twist, it could be that if you're that pizzeria and I might be a bakery making breakfast, and you and I decide to collaborate and do some kind of, you buy a pizza and you get a breakfast all in one solution, and we sit down and we start attacking new customers or something. Then in relation to that project, we might be seen as controllers, both of us.
So then you both have responsibility.
Yeah. Or imagine that you're a small tech developer and you start negotiations with this big marketing company. Then you might also end up that you're both controllers, because you both decide together what kind of data to use. It might not be that you were only assigned, do this because we want it. It might be more of a mutual, where you're on the same level.
Okay.
So that's really good to know that it can be two controllers.
But let's say I have a company when I'm alone and I handle all my businesses myself. Can I be both the controller and the processor?
Then you're the controller and you have no processor.
I have no processor then, but I'm still in 100% responsibility for what information coming out. Okay.
But if you're a small tech company that and you are a processor for somebody else, you might just help with marketing for this big company. You're super happy you got this big client. You take care of their events or something like that and get personal data. That doesn't mean that you cannot be a controller in relation to other data. Because what happens if you, within that scope, you employ me or you contract some other service provider to deliver something which entails personal data. And if you're the processor, in this case, and you feel like, oh, I want to use that other service provider, you're not allowed to transport that data as a processor without having been allowed by the controller. So if you're the processor and you want to transmit that data to somebody else, you need to make sure you are permitted.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Really good, because it easily happens. Because when you think about it, often we do use different external, in particular if we're a small business owner or a small startup. We use more other service providers than we would think often.
Yes, I mean, everything is digital. You use different things.
Exactly. Each time. And like we talked about in the first episode, personal data is so very broad.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to what you need to do with it now that we talked about like who's who and when do we even come into GDPR.
Exactly. But let's say that you have a company. Do you need to have a written down policy to make sure, I mean, if you get a controller or anything, or if someone asks, do you need to send out the policy? Is it good or is it required?
Absolutely. And the next episode, we'll talk about the 7 principles of GDPR, which the last one of those is accountability. And as a part of accountability, you need to document your processes, think it through, make sure you actually do the assessments, understanding what data am I gathering, what's the purpose of that data, what's the legal basis. We'll have an episode specifically with a checklist on that. So yes.
Perfect. Now you know what a controller is and what a processor is, and you also know what you're responsible for. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So for you businesses, keep on rock on, and now you know more about the GDPR and follow up for the upcoming episodes about it. And also thank you Key Solutions for having us today. So imagine that I have a big tennis club. I have a lot of members and very, very good members as well. And then a big sports company contacts me and say, can we send out Christmas cards and gifts to all of your members? And I said, sure. And they also get 10% discount. And then I, as the tennis club owner, get 10% kickback. So I say, yeah, of course, it's a good deal. So I say yes. And I send over all the information that the big company needs for my customers and the members. And one day, one of the member calls me and said, what in the world is happening? And also, thank you, Key Solutions, for having us today. And how could then they get the information? What do I do then?
GDPR.
GDPR, that's why we are here. And the person is very angry, to be said as well. Yeah,
that's typical. Somebody will be mad.
Yes.
Always.
So in that situation, did I do something wrong?
Well, let's have a look.
Yes.
So, we talked about what is personal data. We talked about you as a controller. In this case, the club. You're the one who has gathered the information about your members, decided what information, why, and how it's processed. And before you gather and process that information, you need to identify a legal ground, legal basis for that processing. And you cannot just switch along the line. You need to know before. That was part of the last episode about the 7 principles, fundamental principles that you need to adhere to. The purpose limitation, why are you processing the data? And lawfulness, do I have a legal ground for it? Yep. And then we have, in GDPR, we have, in Article 6, easy to remember, 6 legal grounds. And you need to pinpoint any processing of that personal data to one of the legal grounds. And in this case, the processing will be you sharing the information with this commercial company. So we'll go from the top and we'll come back to your example.
Yes, let's start.
Yeah. We have consent. And this is rather complex. And when GDPR came along, everybody asked for consent for everything. And that's not so good because consent you can withdraw. And in order to give a consent, so it's a legal basis, it's acceptable, it needs to be freely given, it needs to be clear, specific, and transparent.
So that's good to know.
Very good to know. And so, for instance, imagine that I'm your boss. And I say, well, Ida, I want to put in this location monitor in your car. Because I feel that that's very good for us as an employer to just know where you are during the weekends. Can you sign this consent form for me to make sure that you're okay with me monitoring where you drive on the weekends? Well, in that case, it might not be freely given because the power dynamics between us two makes it so that you might feel that you might lose your job, or I might be mad at you, or some other pressure if your boss comes and says, well, we need to do this now.
Yes,
please
so
sign.
It's kind of being forced to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So free needs to mean it has no other repercussions if you say no. Yeah. So consent is one. Freely given, very clear. You need to understand what you're giving your consent to. So very clear. It cannot just be pre-filled, long form that you can hardly read, which many tried with. So that's number 1, consent. Yes. Number 2 is quite a clear one, fulfilling a contract. So if you're the tennis club owner and I'm gonna pay you a member's fee every month, then of course you need to process information about me, and that can also be information prior to entering into a contract. Because imagine that you're a car dealer and you want to give me a quotation because I want to know what price, and it will include a car insurance. Then perhaps you need specific information about me in order to give me that quote.
So then, and the next one?
Number 3 will be a legal obligation. So, for instance, you might, for tax purposes, even if I quit your tennis club, I'm no longer around. If I've been paying you monthly fee you might need to keep that for tax purposes for 10 or 6 years in your jurisdiction. And it's good to know that legal obligation, that needs to be an obligation under EU law or a jurisdiction within the EU. So it cannot be a legal obligation from Chinese law or the US law, because that might say a legal obligation to keep it forever and to share it with the government. And that won't suffice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the next one.
Which number are we on? We're on
Number 4.
Number 4. And then we have a vital interest. And that's quite a narrow one.
Yeah.
So we won't use that as often, but hear me out. Imagine that when I'm on the tennis court and it's going great, but then I fall over, I trip, and I sprain my ankle and I bump my head and I'm unconscious. Then you might need to share my information with the ambulance and with the hospital, because I'm unconscious, so I can't do it myself. But it's a vital interest. You need to save my life, or at least help me out here. So that's quite narrow, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, to process data when it's a vital interest.
We're heading over to number 5.
And that would be a public interest. So something that the public authorities, something need to do, or you on assignment from them. So that's also rather narrow when we're talking about us business owners and founders here.
And we have number 6.
And that's quite exciting. That's a legitimate interest.
What can that be?
Yeah, and then we'll do a balancing act. We'll do a test, see what's the purpose of the processing. Is it necessary, the processing? Can you do that reach that purpose with some other means? Because then it will not be a legitimate interest. And number 3, a balancing between your legitimate interest, that purpose, and my interest as a data subject for keeping my personal data as is, my integrity. So that's a nuanced one, and what it can be to detect fraud, for example, but that's kind of obvious, I would say, that can be a legitimate interest. But more interesting is that it can be commercial interest as well.
Okay, and what can that be, for example?
Sharing your membership with a sports brand could be a legitimate interest. As long as it's reasonably expected from your members that this could happen, and you have all of the other safeguards in place, and you do not overshare, this could really be a legitimate interest. So that's very good to keep in mind, that commercial interest can be a legitimate interest, but you need to do the test. Number 1, the purpose, identify. Necessity, number 2. Number 3, the balancing between the two, the individual's interest and your interest. Is it reasonable and reasonably to be expected? And number 4, you need to do a legitimate interest assessment. And that means taking these 3 in the test and documenting it.
Okay.
Show that you did your homework.
So for the example in the beginning, did I do something wrong?
Perhaps not.
Okay.
But there is case law with a tennis club that they did see that this was a legitimate interest. But it will be a case-by-case test, so I'm not going to say yes or no.
Okay. But can it depend on how I send over the information too, just by email or a piece of paper and handing over?
And how extensive is it? Is it kids? Is it some kind of sensitive information? Because anytime you're handling sensitive information, you need to have one of these legal bases, and you need to comply with extra regulation. And sensitive data is your health, political, ethical, racial, and also we have specific regulation concerning if you have been convicted of a crime or in some way suspected of a crime. So keep that in mind also. Could it be sensitive data that you need to comply with one of the 6 legal bases and additional demands?
That's really good to know. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we should think of regarding this?
No, I think that's it. And just remember, you need to define the legal basis before you process the data. Document it, that's your best protection. And in particular, if it's a legitimate interest you're going for, do the LIA, that is legitimate interest assessment. Show that you did your homework.
Yeah, remember that. Thank you so much once again.
Thank
This
you.
is an episode from our masterclass about GDPR and data protection, which is a European law. And we're here to share this with you. It's not legal advice, it's knowledge sharing. It's very good to remember.
Only.
So if you have a business, this is really good to know because you want to have a good reputation and do not mishandle information and
Indeed.
personal data.
No.
Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Stay tuned because we'll be back as always. So I got my dream job at a bank. I was on every interview and every step closer to getting the offer. But something happened. Everything went silent. Days turned into weeks and I heard nothing. I managed to get a hold on the HR manager and I asked her what happened. Her only reply was, after a few seconds of pausing, just Google yourself. And then she hung up on me.
Ooh.
So I decided to type my own name into the search bar. Headlines were flashing. Criminal conviction, but it was not me. It was my father.
Ooh, nightmare.
Nightmare.
Oh my God.
So should I be judged for that? Should my future depending on something that someone else did? And should I really have to prove myself to just prove who I actually am?
Huge problem.
So
Yeah.
in this case, what can I do? That's what we're going to talk about today.
We are.
Definitely. And this is a part of the masterclass on GDPR.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the right to be forgotten.
Yes, which I never heard about.
No. So let's learn, because it's so important and it can help you guys out if you have some information about yourself online that you do not want others to see, that can hurt you when you look for a job, when you're dating, you look for an apartment, etc. Because, I mean, information like that online, you not getting a job, because you can imagine on the other end, if they Google you and you're in competition with 10 other people,
Exactly.
why would they go with you if they see that you're related to financial crime, right? So, super dangerous, super complex, and people also have so much misinformation about each other online, etc.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Yeah, it is. So
To start with.
yeah, we're going to help you out.
Yes.
So to start with, when we talk about GDPR, we're in Europe. So if the company is in Europe or you as a private person is based in Europe, you have this protection. And then what you can do is under Article 17 in GDPR, you have a right to erasure, which we here now call the right to be forgotten.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is a right to turn to the data controller, that's the one that's processing the personal data about you, and say, you know what, remove, delete, I don't want it.
Yes, but in this situation,
Yeah.
what do we do then? I mean, it's not my information.
No. And what we can do is we can turn to Google, because in 2014, there was a European Court of Justice made a ruling against Google Spain that said that Google may not index information if a person demands that they have a right to be forgotten in relation to a query on their name. So what you can do in this instance is you can turn to Google and tell them, I want the query in Ida Shimmy, then I do not want the URLs, the information connected to my father, connecting me to this financial crime, to stay. I want you to remove it.
Oh, so you can erase a connection.
Yeah. The data, the web page will remain. And if you search for something else, perhaps your father's name or the type of crime it was, then you can still get the information from the Google search. But if you search for Ida Shimmy, you can demand that they erase it, remove it.
Okay, because my next question was if the father was supposed to claim this right to be forgotten.
He can try as well. And every time, it's not an absolute right. You can only claim it relating to yourself, or if me as a lawyer, you can give me a power of attorney so I can do it for you, of course. There are even agencies that are professional trying to clean up people's reputation online.
Yes,
of course.
I understand.
Yeah. But otherwise, you have to do it for yourself. You need to verify your identity. So you have to show that you're Ida Shimbi. And then it's not an absolute right. We have to make an assessment whether the information is it inaccurate, inadequate, irrelevant, or excessive. And in this case, you can of course argue that it's not related to me. So it's excessive, it's irrelevant in relation to me, it's a long time ago, etc. And then most likely it sounds like you have a chance to get it removed related to your name, since it's something a long time ago that your father did and not you.
Oh, because it gets so big effective on me as a private person.
Exactly.
I didn't do anything.
Precisely. So there you can. But also, it's in the EU.
Yes.
Which means that if I take a flight to New York and I Google Ida Shimbi, I will get the information. So remember that.
That's the tricky part.
Yeah. Because in the US, they weigh more heavily on the freedom of expression. And it's very important to respect both the sides. Because, I mean, imagine, Ida, that what if it's about you? You committed financial crime. And then you run for office, or you're appointed to be the new Minister of Finance in France. Would it be okay if you can tell Google, remove all of the information about me being a financial criminal?
That's a bit shady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a complex issue that where do you draw the line between protecting you and your privacy, freedom of expression, and the public's interest for information. So if you are a public person, the right to be forgotten will be less.
Yes, I
But
understand.
if it's old information, the right to be forgotten will be more likely. If you're not a public person, it's more likely. If it's inadequate. For example, let's say that it's information that I Google, let's say you're arrested for a crime 5 years ago. But there's no more information, and in fact, you were let go 5 minutes later. Then you can argue that it should be removed.
Okay.
Because it's incomplete, right? So
Yes,
it gives me the perception that you are a criminal, but 5 minutes later, oh, sorry, it was the wrong redheaded woman.
Yes,
So
it was.
It was. Wasn't me.
But then let's say, because everybody's sharing so much information online on, social medias and everything. So imagine if I had like a Twitter account or, X nowadays, and I shared controversial ideas that I do not feel or can agree on today. Can I remove that type of information?
And that is also, like we said, Google only can remove it from the indexing, not the core source that will remain. But anything that you control, that's your account, typically you will have a right to remove it. But then if somebody else backlogged it, it might be hard to get access and have that removed. But your own accounts, typically, you have a far-reaching possibility to remove the information yourself.
That's very good to know.
Yeah, so think about that. Like, who has the information? How can I get it removed? Because also if you go directly to the URL link, the core, then there will be nothing for Google to index, right?
Yes, of course.
So think about that. Try to map out, because Google is such a powerful, and we're talking about all search engines. But we'll also drop down below, because Google is very helpful. So they have a form that you can fill in. So we'll drop that down below so you can find it. Yeah, and just fill it in. And what you need to do again is verify your identity. If it's your name, it can also be your nickname. That if you search, you want something removed. Be specific what URL links you want removed and why. So be very clear about how it relates to your name and why it should be removed.
That's really helpful knowledge.
Yeah, it is. So you can do a lot.
Yes. And now you know about the right to be forgotten.
Yep.
So if you think that this knowledge is valuable for you, like and subscribe our channel, because we're going to keep sharing this valuable knowledge to you so you can have this, as we just talked about, right to be forgotten, for example.
We're here for you, and we can expand, and we can go deep, and we can keep it high level.
Exactly. And if you have more questions, please drop them down below. We're happy to answer them.
Indeed. And we're powered by
LE Fitness today.
Fitness.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hej då!
Hej då!